after that day, something changed in me. The fear that had always been present transformed into something denser, more paralyzing. I started actively avoiding Gabriel. I stayed in my room when he was home. I prepared extra food at lunch so I wouldn't have to cook at dinner when he was usually in the kitchen. I timed my bathroom trips for moments when he wasn't in the hallway, but avoiding didn't work. He would come looking for me. He'd knock on the bedroom door, enter without permission, sit on my bed and start talking. Sometimes it was hours of monologues about how life was unfair to him, how nobody understood him, how everyone was against him. Other times they were endless interrogations about where I had put something of his, accusations that I was messing with his things on purpose, and always, always the veiled threats. You know, Grandpa, if you were in a nursing home, at least you'd have nurses to take care of you. Here you only have me, and I don't know how much longer I can take it. Or, if you fall again, there might not be anyone here to call the ambulance. That would be a shame, wouldn't it? I tried to talk to Clara one last time, about 6 months ago. I waited for her to come visit me on a Sunday and asked to talk alone. I told her everything. The pushes, the marks, the fall on the stairs, the constant terror. She listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. When I finished, she held my hands and said, "Dad, I know Gabriel is difficult. I know he has problems, but he's my son. I can't just give up on him, and you can't either. He needs us, especially you. You're the only stable male figure he's ever had in his life." I felt something break inside me at that moment. The realization that my own daughter would choose to protect my abuser. That I was alone in this. The following months were the darkest of my life. Gabriel realized I had talked to Clara and increased the control. He started searching my things, saying he was worried I had hidden medications and could accidentally hurt myself. He confiscated my phone for an entire week, claiming I was too confused and might call wrong numbers and get myself in trouble. He also started controlling my food. He served my portions, deciding what and how much I would eat. "You're getting too thin, Grandpa. You need to eat more." Or, "You're gaining weight, Grandpa. High cholesterol is dangerous at your age." It was never right. There was always something wrong with me that he needed to fix. There were nights when I seriously considered running away, simply grabbing some clothes and leaving. But where to? I was 80 years old, had limited financial resources, and Gabriel had managed to isolate me from all my friends and most of my family. Who would believe me? He had built this narrative so carefully that I was senile, confused, dangerous to myself. The truth is, I started believing that narrative too. I constantly questioned my own perception of reality. Did things really happen the way I remembered? Was I exaggerating? Was it all in my head, and was Gabriel really trying to help me in his confused way? That's the power of psychological abuse. It doesn't just hurt, it makes you doubt the hurt itself. It makes you question if the pain is real, if you deserve to be taken seriously, if you're not just being dramatic or too sensitive. I should have noticed the signs earlier. But when you love someone, when it's your own flesh and blood, you always make excuses, always find justifications for behaviors that any stranger would identify as dangerous within seconds. My name is Robert. I'm 80 years old, and for the last 5 years I've lived a private hell inside my own home, at the hands of my grandson Gabriel, It all started when my daughter Clara showed up at my door that rainy March afternoon. She was desperate, her eyes swollen from crying, holding a worn suitcase and practically dragging Gabriel, who was 17 at the time. She had just gotten divorced for the second time, was unemployed, and Gabriel had been expelled from his third school in 2 years. She needed a place to stay, just until she got back on her feet. How could I say no to my own daughter? In the beginning, Gabriel was just a difficult teenager. Moody, yes, but I attributed it to his age and the turbulent changes in his life. He spent hours locked in the room that used to be my office, listening to loud music, only coming out to grab something from the fridge without saying a word. Clara worked 2 jobs trying to save money for an apartment, so it was me who stayed home with him most of the time. I retired 15 years ago after working 40 years as an accountant, and my quiet routine of reading, morning walks and visits to friends was gradually falling apart. The first 3 months were relatively calm. Gabriel was distant but not aggressive. Then the small things began. He would take money from my wallet without asking. At first, it was $5, $10. When I mentioned it, he denied it with such firm conviction that I started doubting my own memory. Had I spent it and forgotten? After all, I was 80 years old. Maybe my memory really was failing. Then came the food. I would prepare lunch, leave a plate for him in the fridge before going out for my walk. When I returned, I'd find the food thrown in the trash, untouched, and Gabriel was eating instant noodles on the couch while watching something on his phone. When I asked why he hadn't eaten what I prepared, he said it smelled bad, that it was probably spoiled. "You're getting old, Grandpa. You don't notice when things are going bad." Those words. They would repeat themselves in increasingly cruel ways over the next few years. "You're getting old. You don't understand anything anymore. Your head doesn't work right." It was as if he had identified my greatest fear, the fear every elderly person carries of losing lucidity, of becoming a burden, and decided to use it as his main weapon. Clara was rarely home. When I tried to talk to her about Gabriel's behavior, she would get irritated with me. "Dad, he's going through a hard time. You need to have patience. I'm trying to survive here too." And then she would look at me with that tired look, loaded with guilt and desperation, and I felt selfish for adding more weight to her shoulders. So I stayed quiet. It was in the 6th month that the psychological abuse intensified dramatically. Gabriel started waking me up in the middle of the night, banging on my bedroom door, saying he had heard noises. "Grandpa, someone's trying to get in. Don't you hear it? Are you going deaf too?" I would get up, heart racing, check all the doors and windows, find everything locked and normal. He insisted he was sure that he had seen shadows. This happened 2-3 times a week. I stopped sleeping properly. I began having insomnia, feeling constantly on alert. Then came the accidents. My glasses would disappear. I would leave them on my nightstand, and in the morning they weren't there. I searched desperately throughout the entire house, and Gabriel watched with a discreet smile at the corner of his mouth. "Lost them again, Grandpa? This is getting serious. Maybe you need help." Hours later, I would find the glasses in impossible places. Inside the microwave, in the plant pot, inside the washing machine, and whenever I found them, I wondered if it really had been me who put them there and forgot. He started spreading this narrative to other people too. When my sister called, He would answer the phone and say things like, "Aunt Mary, Grandpa's having some memory lapses. Last week he went out in his pyjamas. We're worried." Complete lies, but told with such seriousness that my sister started calling me concerned, asking if I was okay, if I didn't need to see a doctor. The isolation happened gradually. My friends stopped visiting because Gabriel created embarrassing situations. Once, my friend Arnold came over for coffee, and Gabriel walked into the living room saying loudly that I had soiled my pants and needed to change. It was a lie, but Arnold was so uncomfortable that he left shortly after and never came back. Another friend, John, stopped calling me after Gabriel answered the phone and said I was too confused to talk, that it was better if he didn't call any more, because it made me agitated. Clara finally managed to rent a small apartment, but there was no room for Gabriel. "Dad, just a few more months. As soon as I get a bigger place, we'll leave." But the months turned into years, and Gabriel not only remained, but began to completely dominate the house. He controlled the television, always choosing what he wanted to watch, turning up the volume when I asked him to lower it. He controlled the air conditioning temperature, keeping it freezing even when I complained about the cold. He used my computer without asking, changing passwords and settings, making me feel completely incompetent with technology. The physical abuse began almost imperceptibly. An accidental push when passing by me in the hallway, a grip too tight on my arm when he wanted my attention. "Sorry, Grandpa, didn't see you there. You should walk making noise so people know you're nearby." Always a justification. Always a way to make it seem like it was my fault. Then came the day he really pushed me. I was preparing dinner when he came into the kitchen angry because he couldn't find his phone charger. He started yelling at me, saying I had taken it, that I was hiding his things on purpose. I tried to explain that I hadn't seen any charger, and he simply pushed me against the counter. I felt a sharp pain in my ribs. I stood there, holding the counter, trembling, while he rummaged through the drawers. He found the charger under the couch, where he himself had left it, and left without apologizing, without acknowledging what he had done. I started wearing long sleeves even in the heat to hide the bruises on my arms. When Clara asked about a visible bruise, I said I had bumped into the door, tripped on the stairs. I was ashamed to admit I was being beaten by my own grandson. What kind of man allows this? I was 80 years old, but I had always been strong, always been respected. How had I gotten to this point? Gabriel started bringing friends home. Young people I had never seen, who smoked inside the house, who made noise until dawn. When I asked them to respect quiet hours, they laughed. Once, one of them flicked cigarette ashes into my coffee. When I complained, Gabriel said I was losing it, that nobody had done anything, that I was seeing things. It was around this time that I discovered, through a conversation I overheard between Gabriel and Clara, that he had been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder years ago. Clara was crying, saying he wasn't taking his medication, that she didn't know what to do anymore. Gabriel responded coldly that there was nothing wrong with him, that the doctors were all incompetent, that she was the crazy one for believing that diagnosis. Everything made sense in that moment. The constant manipulation, the lack of remorse, the compulsive lying, the need for control. But understanding didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made me feel more hopeless. How could I confront someone like that? Someone who felt no empathy, who saw my suffering as a game. The worst incident happened last winter. I was going down the stairs when Gabriel, who was coming up, simply pushed me. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a bump. It was deliberate. I saw it in his eyes before it happened, that cold, calculating look. I fell tumbling down the last 5 steps, hit my head, felt something crack in my wrist. I lay on the floor, breathless, pain exploding in several parts of my body at once. Gabriel stood at the top of the stairs for a few seconds, just watching. Then he calmly came down and said, "Grandpa, you need to be more careful. These stairs are dangerous for someone your age. I'm going to have to talk to Mum about putting you in a nursing home. You can't take care of yourself anymore." Nursing home. The word every elderly person fears. And he knew it. He was using it as a threat, as control. I went to the hospital, said I had tripped. I fractured my wrist and had a mild concussion. The nurse looked at me with suspicion when she saw other marks on my body, but I insisted it had been a fall. Gabriel was by my side, playing the concerned grandson to perfection, touching my shoulder carefully, telling the doctors he was very worried about Grandpa, that he was going to take better care of me. After that day, something changed in me. The fear that had always been present transformed into something denser, more paralyzing. I started actively avoiding Gabriel. I stayed in my room when he was home. I prepared extra food at lunch so I wouldn't have to cook at dinner when he was usually in the kitchen. I timed my bathroom trips for moments when he wasn't in the hallway, but avoiding didn't work. He would come looking for me. He'd knock on the bedroom door, enter without permission, sit on my bed and start talking. Sometimes it was hours of monologues about how life was unfair to him, how nobody understood him, how everyone was against him. Other times they were endless interrogations about where I had put something of his, accusations that I was messing with his things on purpose, and always, always the veiled threats. "You know, Grandpa, if you were in a nursing home, at least you'd have nurses to take care of you. Here you only have me, and I don't know how much longer I can take it. Or, if you fall again, there might not be anyone here to call the ambulance. That would be a shame, wouldn't it?" I tried to talk to Clara one last time, about 6 months ago. I waited for her to come visit me on a Sunday and asked to talk alone. I told her everything. The pushes, the marks, the fall on the stairs, the constant terror. She listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. When I finished, she held my hands and said, "Dad, I know Gabriel is difficult. I know he has problems, but he's my son. I can't just give up on him, and you can't either. He needs us, especially you. You're the only stable male figure he's ever had in his life." I felt something break inside me at that moment. The realization that my own daughter would choose to protect my abuser. That I was alone in this. The following months were the darkest of my life. Gabriel realized I had talked to Clara and increased the control. He started searching my things, saying he was worried I had hidden medications and could accidentally hurt myself. He confiscated my phone for an entire week, claiming I was too confused and might call wrong numbers and get myself in trouble. He also started controlling my food. He served my portions, deciding what and how much I would eat. "You're getting too thin, Grandpa. You need to eat more." Or, "You're gaining weight, Grandpa. High cholesterol is dangerous at your age." It was never right. There was always something wrong with me that he needed to fix. There were nights when I seriously considered running away, simply grabbing some clothes and leaving. But where to? I was 80 years old, had limited financial resources, and Gabriel had managed to isolate me from all my friends and most of my family. Who would believe me? He had built this narrative so carefully that I was senile, confused, dangerous to myself. The truth is, I started believing that narrative too. I constantly questioned my own perception of reality. Did things really happen the way I remembered? Was I exaggerating? Was it all in my head, and was Gabriel really trying to help me in his confused way? That's the power of psychological abuse. It doesn't just hurt, it makes you doubt the hurt itself. It makes you question if the pain is real, if you deserve to be taken seriously, if you're not just being dramatic or too sensitive. But I knew. Deep down, I knew this wasn't normal, that no grandson should treat his grandfather this way, that I didn't deserve to live in fear inside my own home, my own family. The turning point came 2 weeks ago. I was sitting on the porch on a Sunday afternoon, one of the few places where I still felt relatively safe. Gabriel came out, lit a cigarette, and sat next to me. For a few minutes we sat in silence. Then he spoke, his voice low and frighteningly calm. "You know, Grandpa, sometimes I think about how much easier it would be if you weren't here. This house is yours, right? If something happened to you, the house would be Mum's, and Mum would let me live here without stress, without having to pretend I care, without having to put up with your complaints and your pathetic presence." He took a long drag on his cigarette and continued. "It would be so easy. You're old, fragile. Accidents happen. Stairs are dangerous. Medications can be mixed up. Nobody would question it." He got up, put out his cigarette on the porch railing, leaving a burned mark on the wood, and went into the house. I sat there, my whole body shaking, my mind racing. Was that a death threat? Should I call the police? But what would I say? He hadn't explicitly said he would do something. A competent lawyer would easily argue it was just a frustrated young man venting. It was that night, lying in bed, unable to sleep, listening to every sound in the house with my heart racing, that I made a decision. I needed to document everything. I needed proof. I needed to make someone believe me. I managed to retrieve my old phone from a drawer where Gabriel hadn't looked. It still worked. I started recording audio of interactions with Gabriel, hiding the phone in my pocket. I started taking photos of the marks on my body, the broken things, the mess he made on purpose in my room. I started writing everything in a notebook I hid inside a hollow book on the shelf, recording dates, times, what was said and done. I also decided to seek professional help. I found the number for an elderly protection service and called from a payphone during one of my short walks that Gabriel still allowed me to take. The social worker who answered was kind, patient. She listened to my entire story without interrupting me. When I finished, she said something that made me cry right there in the phone booth. "Mr. Robert, what's happening to you is called family abuse. You're not crazy. You're not exaggerating. You don't deserve this, and we're going to help you." She scheduled a home visit for next week, at a time when Gabriel is usually out. She'll come accompanied by a psychologist and possibly a police officer. They'll assess the situation, see the evidence I've collected, and determine next steps. Options include a restraining order against Gabriel, mandatory therapy, and psychiatric monitoring, or, in the worst case, criminal charges of abuse and threats. I'm scared of Gabriel's reaction when he finds out, scared of Clara's reaction, scared of destroying my family. But I'm also feeling something I haven't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I can have peace again. That I can go back to sleeping without fear of being woken in the middle of the night. That I can walk through my own house without calculating every move to avoid confrontation. I know many won't understand. They'll ask why I waited so long, why I didn't do anything before, why I protected Gabriel even when he hurt me. And the truth is complex. It's about family love. It's about shame. It's about the fear of being seen as weak, as incompetent. It's about subtle and devastating manipulation that makes you question your own reality. It's about the isolation that makes you feel you have nowhere to go, no one who will believe you, no way out. But it's also about survival, about waking up every day, despite the fear, despite the pain, and continuing. It's about finding courage in the smallest things, in a phone call asking for help, in a photo taken in secret, in a word written in a hidden notebook. Gabriel has serious psychiatric problems. I understand that now. But understanding doesn't mean accepting being a victim. He needs professional help, adequate treatment, possibly medication and intensive therapy. But I can't be his savior at the cost of my own safety and mental health. Clara will have to make difficult decisions. She'll have to confront the reality that her son is an abuser. She'll have to choose between protecting him unconditionally or also protecting her father. I don't know which path she'll choose, and that hurts me deeply. But I can no longer make my pain a reason to remain in an abusive situation. As I write this, mentally, reviewing the last 5 years, I realize how many signs I ignored, how many times I chose silence instead of reporting, how many chances I had to change this course. But I also remember that it's not the victim's fault. Abuse is always the responsibility of the abuser. Gabriel is young, 22 years old now. He has his whole life ahead of him. With adequate treatment, maybe he can learn to control his impulses, develop empathy, live healthily in society. Or maybe not. It's not my responsibility to save him. My responsibility now is to save myself. Tomorrow morning, I'll wake up as I have every day, with that tightness in my chest, that feeling of constant alert. But I'll also wake up knowing that in a few days someone will come. Someone who believes me. Someone who will help me. And that makes all the difference. I deserve to live my last years in peace. I deserve not to be afraid inside my own home. I deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. All elderly people deserve that. No one should have to endure abuse from family members, regardless of circumstances, regardless of psychiatric diagnoses, regardless of any justification. If you're reading this and recognize your own story in my words, please seek help. You're not alone. You're not crazy. You don't deserve what you're going through. There are people and institutions that can and want to help. Don't wait 5 years like I did. Don't let fear and shame paralyze you to the point of almost losing your own identity and sanity. And if you're someone who has an elderly person in your family, pay attention. Notice changes in behavior, social isolation, unexplained marks, disproportionate fear of some family member. Ask, investigate, believe. Sometimes a simple act of believing can save a life. I'm 80 years old. I've survived a lot in this life. I raised 2 children alone after my wife died young. I worked hard for 40 years. I overcame illnesses, losses, disappointments. and I'll overcome this too. Because in the end, what defines a person isn't what happens to them, but how they respond. And I choose to respond with courage, even if belated. I choose to respond seeking justice, even if painful. I choose to respond believing I deserve better, because I do. The story hasn't ended yet. There are still chapters to be written. But for the first time in 5 years, I feel I have some control over how this story will continue. And that, in itself, is already a victory. What aspects of this story resonated most with you?